Greetings, one and all. It is I, Pathinder, your Lord Emperor here in the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. Of course, if you are joining me live on Twitch, or a few days later on YouTube, it's October. It's a spooky season. So all this month, I will be having tabletop topics that have a little bit of a spooky flair to them. They're not going to be a true dive into horror and spookiness, because honestly, your adventures are probably not going to have a lot of that. It's very difficult to bring in. But today, I've got a topic for you that's a very interesting one. I'm going to be talking about Fetchlings. Yes, we're diving into the Pathfinder people, sometimes known as Kyle, who are humans trapped in the plane of shadows who have changed into these creatures that are slightly different. We'll also be talking about the plane of shadows itself a little bit, introducing this realm of darkness and what is between darkness and light, realm of shadows, this twisted reflection of reality. It's a little bit of that spooky nature, and certainly using the plane of shadows for your adventures would bring a little bit of spookiness in, just a little bit. So that's why we're talking about two of them to start out with. So I hope you enjoy this entire month. This will be the first of them I'll mention at the start of these. And of course, if you've played a Fetchling, or if you've been on adventures in the Plane of Shadows in Pathfinder, let me know in the comments below, or in the chat if you're here directly. Some people do end up meeting. Anyway, alright, let's me throw myself over to the proper chatting corner. I really have to get a toggle for this, and then we'll start out with the books I might recommend. I don't know if there's a book there. No. So there are a number of books I would recommend. The first couple of books that we're going to talk about are more for Fetchlings, and then we'll talk about a few books that are going to be set up for the Plane of Shadows and some of the other topics related to that we're going to be talking about. Because these also do taper back into Fetchlings to a degree. We're not going to go total deep into the Plane of Shadows, because there's more I can talk about with it, but we're going to give you enough to accompany the Fetchling, kind of establish things. Inner Sea Races is a good one. Ancestry Guide, because they do have stats on playing them in 2nd edition. And of course, for getting more into the information around the Plane of Shadows, the campaign settings, and the Great Beyond. These are the books I would recommend you check out. As I said, as I always say, for all of these, the Pathfinder Wiki, also the there is a little bit of information on the Archives of Nethys, along with basically some society and stuff like that, does exist there too, but it's not a lot of information. It's one of the reasons that I involved the Plane of Shadow so heavily with the Fetchling, is there isn't a lot on the Fetchling. They exist, they appear in the material plane, they appear in the shadow plane. There's not a lot much else to say about them, other than they are descended from humans. And that's kind of where we should start, I guess, is they are the Kyle, Kale. I don't actually know how to pronounce that one. It's K-Y-A-L. I'm going to say Kale. Humans that became trapped in the Plane of Shadows and over generations were warped by the powers of the Plane of Shadows. I'll talk a little bit more about what the power and the warping and the energies within the Plane of Shadows is when I dive into that a little bit more. But just know there is a lot of things. And negative energy, the energy that oftentimes fuels and heals undead, is a major thing there. So Fetchlings tend to have a very slender build, stark white or black hair, pale yellow eyes. They do try to combat their monochromatic nature, dye their hair vivid colors with planar traveling merchants. They are very similar to the people humans, but are just this leeching of color. And again, there is this connection with humans, as there's diversity in physical shapes that, if you would look at it, yes, you would think, without getting into the details of coloration and stuff like that, very human in shape at very least. So yeah. One of their Fetchling, the big things is they have a shadow which doesn't reflect their body, which can be of any kind of shape or size, kind of reflecting itself. It's very interesting. There are some Fetchlings which are not probably based around humans, Wisp Fetchlings, which are more sized around halflings, which means more likely wisps are descended of halflings. But again, they might not be. They could be descended by humans that changed them in some way. It's really hard to tell on that end, but the wisps are a unique group amongst them to point out in this case. Yeah. Another fetchling picture as we continue to chat a little bit more about them. Fetchlings are travelers. It's one of those things about them is there are a lot of dangers of the plane of shadows, so they tend to travel around a lot. But also, the idea of connecting with planar traveling merchants or traveling to other planes is not something that they're against. For classes, swashbuckler rogues tend to be very heavily favored just because of their natural agility. The power of the Plane of Shadows can evoke things in people for things like bards, sorcerers. Source of the Shadow Bloodline are one of them. Those that go into the mysteries of their own realm, witches and wizards sometimes. So, most fetchlings want to stay in Golarion, either on the material or Shadow Planes. The Shadow Planes is Shadow Golarion. If the Shadow of Golarion, it's still Golarion in a way. Yeah, we'll explain it a little bit more. They either form fetchling communities or go off on their own. Both are kind of insular on their own, with cultures, reflecting the earlier days of hostility on the Shadow Plane. Because, as I said, Shadow Plane's very hostile. And so they're just, wandering kind of, I want to explore, I want to get out of here, I want to go to a better place kind of mentality that almost exists within them. But these societies are ways of coming together, and this communal bonds and coming together is a bit of trying to, protect against that. And, regardless, they are aware of their extraplanar origins, and there are plenty of fetchlings that will serve as middle between visitors to Shadow Planes and other native inhabitants. Major place for them to exist is Shadow Absalom, which we will talk about in a moment here. But yes, the Beacon, which is of Shadow Absalom, is a major settlement, also called Beast Beacon. Yeah. Alright. So, let's talk about Shadow Absalom and use that to talk about the Shadow Plane. Shadow Absalom is one of the major places of interest / settlements on the Shadow Plane. What is it? It is, of course, a shadow of Absalom, the city, the major metropolis on Golarion. I actually do have a video on Absalom if you want to check it out. It was a previous one. But basically, it's a shadow counterpart on the island of Korthos by the Dusk Bay, and it's filled with dust instead of water. The glare is the most important feature of Shadow Absalom, a portal which can return any extraplanar visitor to their home plane, to the spot they originally left. It's a natural light source that can speed from miles away, and keeps Absalom and Shadow Absalom the same size. It's made out of azites, dructe, spires rise hundreds of feet in the air, entire districts are covered in termite mounds, which are entrances to vast underground Dizaki hives, which are a type of creature. And it's been ruled over by an umbral dragon, an ancient one called, I'm going to butcher this name, because it's a dragon name, Argrin Yixia, the Shifting Lady of Ebon Scales. That is her complete title with her name, and she keeps the city in check, basically. She has monopoly on the commerce, she forbids planar portals that established in the city without her permission. She basically flies in the city regularly to show her power. She controls it. Effectively, the glare, the portal, appeared in the same spot where Eridan raised the Starstone in the Inner Sea, and Fetchlings showed up there. They built a city around it. The most of the city is Fetchlings. I mean, they didn't really have a name for the place. Beacon is the kind of a name for it kind of now because it matches with the glare. But Shadow Absalom is basically what people from Absalom traveling to Shadowplane called it, or from regions that knew about it. Originally the Drasakai were at odds with the Fetchlings who established the city, but they did manage to make peace with them and incorporate them into the city. And basically they had their own counselors until Arginiak's Yazi. I can never pronounce these names like this. This name is just... Maybe if I click on it, they'll give me a pronunciation. Let me just see. No, they don't! Thank you! It's a great word in Umbral Dragon, just to note that. So, you know. Also, Sorcerer 5, because... You know, a Great Worm Dragon also has to have 5 levels of Sorcerer, because reasons. Anyway, yeah, she just took over. Killed the other people in charge. Other humanoids from the material plane, intelligent undeads, Vestrals, Shadow Fae. Others live in the city, but most of it is Fetchlings. And it's a pretty massive metropolis. It is a unique place within the Plane of Shadows. Oh, I should have done the Shadow Absalom picture. There you go. There's just a Plane of Shadow picture. It's very pleasant, inspiring, reminiscent of things. Let's switch to this entire thing here, because this is a good thing for talking about the Shadow Plane. We'll talk about this image in a minute, but this is a marker of talking about the Shadow Plane and what reflects the Shadow Plane now. It's also known as the Netherworld, the Plane of Death. It's part of the Inner Sphere. We won't go into a lot of statistics of the plane itself. We're not role-playing it, or we need to know. Well, I'm not physically role-playing it here with you. I'm introducing you to information about it. So it coexists with the material plane and the ethereal plane. It's a reflection of the material plane. Things born there have their color, sounds, tastes, and other forms of perception lessened. It's like a distorted version of things in the material plane. If there's a city in the material plane, there might be a ruin or a twisted representation of a city. Distances don't really correspond the same way. You know, you might take a short walk in the Shadow Plane and end up, if you would go straight to the same place in the material plane, far away from where you were. Fetchlings are the humans that you have there. They are the main inhabitant. We've talked about them now. But there's plenty of others because of the large amount of negative energy. There are undead created that exist within there. Nightshades are particularly created there, which are fairly awful, very powerful undead. So just keep in mind that they exist. There are shadow giants, vestricles, the Disrankis. There's plenty of things that exist in this location. And here's where we come to our little image that we have here. This is Zon Cathon, the Midnight Lord, Prince of Dark, Prince of Pain, a dark god who possesses one of the most twisted minds in the Great Beyond. The god of pain is the great way to say it. This is his battle against Shaylin. So, it should be noted that he was imprisoned in the Plane of Shadow for a long time. And his dark power basically tainted a lot of it. There are places in the plane that show his influence more than others. He's no longer imprisoned, but he still lives there in a region known as, I will butcher this one here, because it starts with this X, Zoviking. It's a lightless steel labyrinth of hopelessness and suffering. It was originally, according to legend, it was a prison constructed by Abadar who restrained him. He was released due to technicality. Abadar is very lawful. Technicality got God of Pain out of jail, and so now he just moved into it as his own domain. you know, you gotta say, like, that's a thing that exists. But there's also, like, the hinterlands of Zon-Cathon, which are, you know, a manifestation of dreams and nightmares fueled by his hatred for his imprisonment. And, you know, that's a thing that exists. So, yeah. Basically, the entire thing is Zon-Cathon. Basically, there was an exchange for his exile to the Plane of Shadows. The imprisonment was because of a deal with Abadar that they were kind of in a conflict with. And the Age of Darkness basically got them out of the deal. So, yeah. That's kind of where we go with the Plane of Shadows and stuff like this. The thing is, because we don't know a lot about it other than the basics and how it works, and a couple of locations, and the major player, of course, Zon-Cathon, there are some other, like the Velstrak demagogues are other divine entities there. Rulers of the Velstrak, otherwise known as Chitons. So, like, their own things, to say the least, is, you know, what would have been in, like, D&D are chain devils, are not chain devils. The Chithons. They're their own thing now, and they're creatures of the Plane of Shadows, and they're kind of the worst there. And they serve the Velstrak demagogues, who are basically their lords. And, you know, are a big part of the Plane of Shadows. And it's just, so you see there's this entire infrastructure of things. Probably can show off some of these. I don't have this rocket image, do I? Can I find one quickly here for you folks? Maybe. If I can, I will show that. Oh, I got one. There you go. There is a Visrake. And we can share a few more things, of course. So these other creatures, which I probably should have gotten together earlier, and I didn't, because I'm a silly goose. You know, the usual. There's a Chithon. There is the Darvaka, aka the Nightshades. I don't have a Shadow Giant. That's a really good image. It is a pretty good image. There's a Nightshade, looking really pleasant and murdery, and, you know, elimination of all things. And, we'll get a... that's a Velstrak demagogue there. That thing, which is just like a torn up flesh face on a pyre. You know, it's the Plane of Shadows. It's not a great place, but Fetchlings are there. Anyway, I think that hits about everything I wanted to about the Fetchlings and Plane of Shadows. As I said, I originally wanted to talk about Fetchlings a little bit because they were interesting and they kind of fit with this, with the themes of this season, and I've been going over plenty of Ancestors, but it was an excuse to also kind of dive into a little bit about what's going on with Plane of Shadows, where they originate from, and where it kind of understands where they originate from, what it means to originate from there. While they are affected by the negative energy and powers of the Plane of Shadows, they have remained notoriously human. For better or worse. It means that they are their own person. No one Fetchling is the same as other. You know, you're not going to have a specific alignment. Just because you're from the Plane of Shadows does not mean you're evil. But there are a lot of energies that can lead to evil within there, and a lot of power bases within the Plane of Shadows the Shadow Plane that can lead to evil and horrible things. And I think that's where it comes about. You have groups that are just there. And you have Shadow Absalom, which is kind of like this relative bastion of civilization. The Zariki, the insect people, they're neutral. They're just neutral. They just live there. And they just live in subterranean hive cities there. And have just existed there for thousands of years. They're just things. And the Fetchlings, they just live there because they have for generations. And yes, you've got giant, huge, horrible undead monstrosities, you know, shadow giants, the Kython/Vestricals and their deities, frickin' nightshades, which are, you know, manifestations, formed between the barrier between the shadow plane and negative energy plane, that are basically incarnations of death and evil. The Darvaka, as they're also known. Yeah, I mean, there are things there that aren't great. It is a dark reflection of the material plane, but it is also shadow. I think that's the important thing to think about the plane of shadow. It's not actually. It's where light and dark meet. It is the reflection in the brightness of the universe, of Golarion. Perhaps in the shadows there are dark and terrible things. There isn't always. And that's why the Fetchlings, who are the people that live there, are probably the most populous of the beings which live there, make up a pretty big society and an important part of it. And yeah, you can find them in the material plane now. There have been ways to escape it, but these are people that live there for generations and certainly found their ways out. It's an interesting kind of juxtaposition between both groups and the existences of them. The evolution of their society, their groups, and the world they are in. And they're very human. Even though they're not now. They were. I hope that is enough to give you guys all out there, you folks, a good idea on to be a fetchling and, honestly, to either adventure or visit the Plane of Shadows, which is very deeply connected with it. I'm going to call it here for today. Be back with more things. You want to see more tabletop from me, it's normally every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. I'm pretty often with it all, you know, usually canceling because of family stuff or schedule change and shit like that comes up. Sometimes it happens. Thursdays tend to be my Pathfinder, Golarion related topics. I usually go over a couple of them. Saturdays are more World of Darkness stuff. Tuesdays are my free game. Usually it's early afternoon, between 1 and 2, sometimes a little later depending on schedule. And then around 11 o'clock, which I have to kind of do just in case I'm busy early in the afternoon, on Saturdays. I can't actually change that schedule too much. I have to be as close to 11 as I can. But those are the big tabletop times. If you missed it, there was a finale of Buccaneers Shackleton. There will be more role-playing related content coming out after October, so expect that. Discussing tabletop on Saturdays at 6 p.m. So more role-playing shows coming out if you want to see some live plays, and then if you want to see some other stuff, basically all this tabletop stuff goes up on the YouTube channel, which if you want to see some support, if you're just coming here on Twitch, follow is great. Coming on YouTube, a subscription, a like, a comment about your Fetchlings and your Shadow Plane, of course, ring the bell if you're already a subscriber. And doing the opposite to the other one is really good. It helps support both of the channels to have them grow. Keeps algorithms and stuff in check and all that stuff. I do also some gaming over on Twitch if you want to check those out. Random games and stuff. Our October is, you know, usually spooky games. Spooky-ish games. I'm always for the spooky-ish. Alright, I think that's all the shouting out I have for today. I hope you enjoyed learning about Fetchlings, a couple other things, and Plane of Shadows. And we'll dive more into the spooky season as we continue. But until that next time, that you all chat, dive into the shadows. For all of you out there, a deep and wonderful